Funny about that. You know who was asking about you the other day? Who's that? Nobody.
We talking about sports, get ball.
What it do, baby? Yeah.
What it do, you number one podcast listeners? We are back with a brand new episode of the number one podcast in your headphones, Prem Brulee. I'm your host, Premal, and once again, I'm joined by my big bro and co-host, Vish. Vish, welcome back, man.
Yo, what up, what up? How's it going? Let's get to it. There's a lot to cover today, you know?
Yeah, we got a lot to cover. The NFL offseason is fast and furious, so we have a lot of moves to go over for you, number one podcast listeners. If you are having trouble keeping up, we have it all organized in one place thanks to Vish. And so number one podcast is here for you. I know you were looking forward to more hockey content because this is the number one source for hockey, but we'll get back to that, I promise, later in the season. So without further ado, you number one podcast listeners, let's get started on Yes, Am or Nah. You know the drill. All right, Vish, before we get to the free agency moves, I wanted to have a little fun discussion with you, Yes, Am or Nah. This was recently said by Travis Hunter at the NFL Combine, a.k.a. the Underwear Olympics. Yes, Am or Nah, what Travis Hunter does in football is harder than what Shohei Ohtani does in baseball. So, again, like I said, this came at the Combine. He was asked the question. It's not like he just threw it out there. In the Combine, they get all kinds of questions from the media. But Hunter said the following when asked which feat is harder, what Ohtani does in baseball or what he did and does in football. Hunter said, quote, "Probably what I do in football, because it's a lot on your body. You know Ohtani, he's a great player, but you got to do a lot in football." Vish, Yes, Am or Nah, to what Hunter said him doing is harder than what Shohei does in baseball?
I'm going to say nah, fam, right? I don't think this is a zag by any means because you could argue one way or the other. And I will caveat this by saying, if Travis Hunter does what he did at Colorado and in college in general and does offense and defense in the NFL, then I think we have a conversation. But what Ohtani is doing is something that we haven't seen in our lifetimes. And you might say, oh, what about Babe Ruth? I don't think there's anyone alive that was there to see Babe Ruth play. So in our lifetimes, it's a huge feat in general. I get that football is a tougher sport, all of that. And yes, Hunter won the Heisman, and no one's discounting that by any means. But I think what Ohtani means and what he's able to do, not just as a dominant pitcher, and yes, he didn't pitch for the Dodgers this past year, but he set records, not just power records, but on the base path as well. So he is not just a power hitter. He actually, even if he gets on base, he's a probable individual to run and get to third base and be in scoring position at the very least. And let's discount all of that. I just saw that Ohtani is now a playable character on Fortnite. Travis Hunter is not. I don't play Fortnite, but I know that's a big deal to be able to be a...
I was getting ready to say, there's no way you've touched Fortnite ever in your history.
I think I've actually seen Sonny play it once, and I was like asleep in like 2 minutes. No offense, Sonny. I think you're a good Fortnite player if you're listening, but I would imagine being a playable character in a video game is pretty cool outside of that. What do you think? I know you don't like Ohtani, but I want to hear what you think about this. And
you already know, number one podcast listeners, we can sound it. Somebody's got to hate the guy. Just love fest for Ohtani, so I'm that guy. But no, seriously, you mentioned it isn't a zag to do either option, but the discourse would disagree with you there. I think a lot of people are on your side, so your zag history does not hold true.
100%. Yep.
A lot of folks are on the boat of Otani, what Otani does being more difficult than Hunter. I am going to assume your role this time.
There you go.
And I'm going
Let's go.
to zag. I'm a yeah fam to what Hunter said. And the reason I want to say this, if we're talking about comparing the levels, obviously Otani's a pro. Hunter is not yet in the NFL, though he will be a very high draft pick. And time will tell what kind of workload he has on both sides of the ball for an NFL team, like he did at Colorado. But all I can compare is what's happened so far. They are very comparable in their accolades. The most Hunter could have earned is a Heisman, and he's done that playing both sides of the ball. Otani has reached the mountaintop. He's a World Series champion. He's won MVP, Cy Young, all that stuff. He's great on both sides of the ball. But my take is more about the feat of what they're doing. There's half of the league that pitches and has hit in MLB history. Not Otani's level. I'm not talking about that. But you grow up in baseball playing, when you're young enough, everybody's a pitcher and everybody hits. So there's plenty of those examples of even pitchers being good hitters in the league. Not as good as Otani's level, obviously. But there are far fewer examples of what Travis Hunter has done, playing both sides of the ball and winning the most prestigious award in college football. A lot of people bring up folks like Hunter's coach, Deion Sanders, someone like Charles Woodson, who won a Heisman Trophy. All these people, our Go Bucks alert, we had Chris Gamble back in the day that played both sides of the ball.
What it do, baby?
Overlooked. But to that level that Hunter has performed, nobody's done it. And a lot of times you've seen people play both sides of the ball, but not to the amount of snaps that Hunter played this past year and not to the amount of accolades. So I think what he's done definitely is more taxing. Obviously, hitting a 95-mile-an-hour fastball is the hardest thing in sports, and then Otani can turn around and pitch it that fast too. But I'll be interested to see what Hunter does in the pros if he can sustain this, but his level of play on both sides of the ball was truly incredible. And to know how physically taxing that sport is, for someone to do that and win a Heisman for it, better than anybody else has done previously. No disrespect to the legends, but they have not played the amount of snaps to result in that level of accolade. Like you're talking about, I brought up Woodson. He won a Heisman, but a lot of stats were from punt and kick returns. He didn't play a ton on offense. Someone like Deion Sanders in the pros played receiver, especially with the Cowboys. It was sparingly. They put him in for a few plays, but they largely preserved him for the defensive side of the ball. Hunter truly was, there was a conversation of which position he should, if he had to choose, which one he should play in the NFL. I think it's now resulted in corner, but I think what Hunter did is more difficult, with the caveat, like, we can only go to the sample size we have so far.
So can I ask you a question about Hunter?
Yeah.
If Hunter played at Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, some of the top schools, do you think he plays that many snaps on both sides of the ball?
No, I think those schools wouldn't have entertained that idea. I think Hunter, to his credit, he followed Coach Prime from Jackson State to Colorado because he knew that Deion Sanders was the best person to allow him to do that and manage his workload. They were kings of content production. They really managed how much Hunter did physically during the week of practice because he was playing so many snaps, and Coach Prime was unique in that. So to answer your question, no, I don't think he would have gotten that level of production, let alone played both sides of the ball. I don't think those top teams would have even entertained it.
Yeah, so that's where my argument, or most of the argument, where the zag kind of starts to fall apart, is that Hunter was in that perfect situation to take advantage of that. You saw that with Woodson. I mean, you just said it, and Gamble, where Gamble became more of a wide receiver. Yes, he played both sides of the ball, but not to the extent of Hunter. And there were a lot of snaps. I'm not discounting that nearly at all, because to win a Heisman is to win a Heisman, right? But I think it's just, Hunter was able to take advantage of that. We'll see what happens in the pros, but, that's where I think the Ohtani and I guess being able to play.
I don't think that's a point against him. I actually would argue that's a point for him, because he went to a place that would utilize his strengths the best, and it worked. It clearly worked.
That's true.
He's going to be a top 5 pick and won a Heisman Trophy. So, okay, that's a fun one. Number one podcast listeners, chime in. What's your take? Give me both sides of the argument. Believe me, I know the difficulty in what Ohtani accomplished and has accomplished already and continues to do. But just wanted a kudos to Travis Hunter. The gist is both of what they do is difficult, but I'll tell you, number one podcast listeners, what is not difficult is Magic Mind. I've talked about this before. My health has been a major priority in 2025 and a little bit before that. I'm constantly looking for ways to maximize my physical and mental health for my wife and my kids, family, friends, you number one podcast listeners. And in order to do that, I wanted to align that level of thinking with what I practice. That's eating right, exercising, and utilizing the right tools to supplement those healthy habits. And that's where Magic Minds come in. It's come at the perfect time with Prem Brulee, and for you number one podcast listeners. I've been telling you for months, the proof is in the fact that I use it myself, and my close family and friends do too. I wouldn't co-sign it if I didn't believe in its impact. The healthy, scientifically backed ingredients. And I think my favorite benefit is the minimizing of caffeine. I think it supplements my caffeine intake without the jitters and the intense caffeine crash that so many of us experience. So, number one podcast listeners, you know the drill by now. I got to take care of y'all. Been talking about this for months. You get 20% off a one-time purchase or 48% off subscriptions by going to magicmind.com/prem. That's magicmind, magicmind.com/PREM. Enter the code PREM20, that's PREM20, to get that awesome deal. And number one podcast listeners, keep an eye out. In the coming months, I'm going to have an even sweeter deal for the first people that jump on it. So just a little tease. Something's coming. Something's brewing for you number one podcast listeners to jump on the Magic Mind bandwagon or benefit if you're already on it on your next order. If I were you, I'd get the subscription. It's the better value. It ships free to your doorstep every month. You can stash in your fridge. It's ready to go without having to think about it or run out. And you can be like me, take it on the go in the morning, or you can pack it maybe in your lunchbox for later as a afternoon pick-me-up, an afternoon focus pick-me-up. There's truly nothing to lose. Magic Mind has a money-back guarantee and easy cancellation if you change your mind, though I do not think you will. So go get it. magicmind.com/prem. Enter the code PREM20. That's PREM and the number 20. Number one podcast listeners, there's nothing to lose. magicmind.com/prem. Enter the code PREM20. Speaking of not losing, all these free agents and the bags they're getting, it's time to recap that NFL free agency. This wild few days. It feels like it's been weeks, but it's only been a few days as we're recording this now, Vish. I'm going to give the rundown first before I have any prompt for you, FM or not. But number one podcast listeners, this is mostly for your knowledge, and we're going to hone in on maybe one or two. We don't want to spend too much time talking about each of these moves, but I did want to give you all a recap so you have all the information in one place, because we're here for you, you number one podcast listeners, so you don't have to scroll through the feeds of all the insiders. We put them all in one place thanks to you, Vish. So let's get started. First up, we got to talk quarterbacks. So some notable quarterback moves. Josh Allen, my goodness. This dude already had a deal, but he agreed on a new 6-year deal worth $330 million with $250 million guaranteed. Coming off an MVP season, just got engaged, and an extra at least $250 million. I mean, he's welcome to use the Magic Mind code, but he probably doesn't need it. Next up, Matthew Stafford. He is staying with LA. He is staying with the Rams. He previously had permission to seek a trade, but he instead restructured his contract to stay there. The QB carousel got a little crazy there. It started with Geno Smith surprisingly being traded from Seattle to Las Vegas. Then Seattle obviously had a vacancy at quarterback. They signed Sam Darnold to a very similar deal they offered Geno reportedly. Justin Fields signed with the New York Jets. Go Bucs alert.
Oh.
Daniel Jones, Danny Dimes, is this is a stolen joke from Pat McAfee show. He is now going to be Indiana Jones for the Colts. He signed with them to presumably compete for a starting role with Anthony Richardson. So we'll see how that goes. What could go wrong for Indy?
Congratulations. You played
and
yourself.
A minor move, potentially major, depending on, I don't know who the Browns have for quarterback, but the Browns traded away Dorian Thompson-Robinson and a 5th-round pick to the Eagles for Kenny Pickett.
Who?
Yes, that Kenny Pickett. So we'll see what happens with him, if he's a backup or is going to play. Next up on the position group movement, wide receiver movement. I should add, full disclosure, number one podcast listeners, we're covering, but we're by no means assuming we covered everything. So if you're expecting to hear about a deep cut, it might not be on there, though we'll try to get to most of it. Anyway, back to receivers. Deebo Samuel was traded from San Francisco to Washington. That was for a 5th-round pick. Christian Kirk traded within the division to your Texans, Vish.
Let's go.
The Jags got a 6th-round pick in exchange. They were planning to release him, but Houston figured why not. He's got 1 year left on his deal, so they're going to owe him, but at least it's just for 1 year. They have Tank Dell is going to be out all year, and Stephon Diggs is a free agent. So a lot of upside there with low risk. DK Metcalf. This happened quick. He requested a trade and then was dealt to Pittsburgh, which should be a wild experience with DK Metcalf and George Pickens. Can't wait to see that. And if they potentially add Aaron Rodgers for a 2nd-round pick and a late-round pick swap, and he signed an extension. Hollywood Brown re-signed with the Chiefs. Chris Godwin re-signed with the Bucs. Devontae Adams, released by the Jets, signed with the LA Rams, likely meaning Cooper Kupp is definitely gone. They were already giving him permission to seek a trade, but it looks like he'll be released. Devontae Adams will now join Puka Nacua in the wide receiver core for Matthew Stafford to throw to. And DeAndre Hopkins signed a 1-year deal with the Baltimore Ravens, affordable deal, and I'm interested to see how that goes. On the offensive line, the Bears made a bunch of moves to shore up their protection for Caleb Williams. Aaron Banks, an offensive guard, signed with Green Bay, who's previously on the Niners. Ronnie Stanley re-signed with the Baltimore Ravens. And the big one for you, Vish, is even Ian Rappaport was surprised by this move, which says a lot. The Texans traded away their left tackle Laramie Tunsil to the Washington Commanders. They traded him and a 4th-round pick and got a 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 7th in exchange. A couple of those are in this year's draft. A couple are in next year's draft.
Yep. More on that later.
Yes.
For sure.
Tease alert.
Tease alert.
Okay, over to the revamped pass rusher group. Sam Hubbard retired. He was due to be cut and be a free agent. He chose to retire at a very young age. Go Bucks alert.
What
Bucks.
it do, baby? Yeah.
The Bengals, I think it was the NFL sack leader, Trey Hendrickson, was given permission to seek a trade. Writing was kind of on the wall with that one because the Bengals have to figure out how to pay their receivers man out. Osa Odigizua re-signed. Love this move, by the way. They needed to keep him. He defensive tackle was a thin group in free agency, so and in the draft, so keeping one of their own was key, and he's done really well and been very durable. He signed a 4-year, $80 million deal with $58 million guaranteed. The Bears are addressing both sides of the line by signing Grady Jarrett, who's released by the Falcons. Josh Sweat, after taking a pay cut and playing in Philly and winning a Super Bowl ring, signed with the Arizona Cardinals for a lucrative deal. And a very good defensive lineman, Jonathan Allen, who was previously on the Washington Commanders, signed with the Minnesota Vikings. And Joey Bosa, who was released by the Chargers, signed a 1-year deal with the Buffalo Bills. I think Buffalo came a little bit out of nowhere from what I was seeing before. A couple other moves. The Panthers really addressed their secondary. They extended the contract of young corner J.C. Horn. They re-signed Mike Jackson at corner and signed Trayvon Moehrig, safety who was previously from on the Raiders. Najee Harris signed a 1-year deal with the Chargers. He's definitely going to get the rock in Jim Harbaugh's system and should work out for them. Another Houston trade. Speaking of offensive linemen traded away, Houston traded away offensive guard Kenyon Green, swapping a 5th for a 6th and getting C.J. Gardner-Johnson back is the Texans. So before we talk about some of these moves, number one podcast listeners, we wanted to talk about the 49ers because now that they are no longer going to have the benefit of a Mr. Irrelevant worthy rookie quarterback contract, they are forced to make a lot of cuts to deal with the salary cap. We already talked about Deebo Samuel being traded away. Who knows if they do the same with Brandon Ayuk. But they've already cut Kyle Juszczyk, Malik Collins. Dre Greenlaw signed with the Denver Broncos, as did Talona Hufanga. So 2 defenders went to Denver.
Yep.
Charvarius Ward went to the Colts. Aaron Banks, the guard, went to Green Bay. Offensive tackle Jalen Moore signed with the Kansas City Chiefs, as did running back Elijah Mitchell. Backup quarterback Josh Dobbs went to New England. And on the defensive line, the Niners had to cut Leonard Floyd, who wound up in Atlanta, and defensive tackle Javon Hargrave wound up in Minnesota. So a lot of people going out, not too many coming in so far. For the Niners, they are going to have to pay Brock Purdy, presumably, very soon. So they are forced to make a lot of contract moves. Okay. That's a lot to cover. Number one podcast listeners. I know. But if you miss one of those names, I know we have some Bengals fans over here. One that I didn't mention before, Mike Gesicki re-signed with the Bengals. I know it's not the news you guys are looking for. Huge move for you guys. Go you guys. But Vish, I love seeing movement. It's fun to see. It appeals to the video game side of us. But instead of yeah, fam or not, I want to have you talk, I'm guessing, a few moves that pertain to your...
Yeah.
Wow.
So, like we teased, Laramie Tunsil getting traded was a huge what the hell just happened. I think when it hit, as you mentioned, even some of the beat writers for the NFL that are covering it were like, wow, this is a big shocker. I think when you look at it, I certainly follow the Texans beat. You've probably seen it being retweeted, even if you follow the national beat. But at the end of the day, it was really just about being able to pay people. And Tunsil was going to require that payment. And so getting rid of him right now when his value was still relatively high was a huge get for him. Tunsil is 30, going to be probably 31 when the NFL season starts. So kind of on the older ends, but down the pike, maybe one this year, couple next year. Will Anderson Jr., Derek Stingley, and also CJ Stroud are going to get a bag themselves. So being able to get that draft capital in was huge for them. And really, the offensive line was, I think, one of the top 10, probably, I think it's either 5th or 8th or 10th, depending on what you look at, top paid offensive line last year in the NFL. And they were one of the worst. So getting rid of Tunsil, getting rid of Kenyon Green that we just mentioned for CJ Gardner-Johnson, I mean, that secondary is going to be lethal. It's a reflection on who D'Amico Ryans is. But at the end of the day, they needed a complete revamp, a culture shift, anything that you see. So I'm glad we got something out of him. Glad we got something out of Kenyon Green, who was a former first-round pick and all of that. So I love it. It's not ideal. But if we need to revamp it and start young and make sure that we pay our players that are made to bait the bag, I'm for it. So I know there's not too many Cowboys moves to talk about for you, like special teams, and they were able to...
Number one podcast listeners, I will not get mad at the Cowboys. I will not get mad at the Cowboys. I will not get mad at the Cowboys.
Say it 3 times. And
you cannot break what's already broken, baby. You cannot break what's already broken.
It works.
I will add, this is from Connor Livesay. You can find him on X at Connor NFL Draft. He wisely brought this up. The Cowboys have not signed a free agent over $6 million per year in free agency since Greg Hardy was signed by them in 2015.
10 years ago. Holy crap.
10 years ago. The salary cap in that time has increased by nearly $136 million.
The Cowboys don't have any cap room, right?
Listen, I will not talk about the Cowboys. I will not get mad at the Cowboys. You cannot break what's already broken, baby. Number one podcast listeners.
Look, I stay petty, so I don't have to
All
get
right.
petty.
So let's shift a little bit. So I want to know your take on the QB carousel that's going on. And a question, it could be something that Thomas and you talk about during your draft preview, whatever. So the question, talk about the QB carousel, and then I also want to preface this by saying, is Sam Darnold being set up as the new Matt Flynn? So getting a bag and then having a quarterback drafted right underneath him and then competing for the draft. Competing for the starting job, I guess.
Listeners, for those of you that don't remember, Matt Flynn,
it's a deep cut. There you go.
Overperformed as a backup, got paid a lot, and then the Seahawks drafted Russell Wilson, who won the starting job. So
the rest is history.
Yeah, Mr. Unlimited.
Mr. Unlimited. Yeah, you got to be unlimited. You got to have a thought process of being unlimited. I'm unlimited.
So a lot of these moves, to me, signify that these guys are stopgaps, almost like transition quarterbacks. Their contracts reflect that. Their payments, though they seem like a lot, are more indicative of like that in-between quarterback, that prove-it type deal that, we're paying you like a starter, but not our long-term solution. So Sam Darnold going to the Seahawks, who are clearly in a rebuild, second-year coach, and they just dealt / cut 2 of their 3-headed monster at receiver. Same thing with Geno Smith going from the Seahawks to the Raiders. It doesn't really move the needle. He's definitely a serviceable starter, so I'm sure he'll do just fine in Las Vegas, but you don't immediately call any of the teams that these guys go to contenders. Darnold was amazing in Minnesota, but obviously he had arguably the best receiver in football there. So going to quite a difference. Obviously Jackson Smith and Jigba had a great season and he'll be the guy there, but it's nowhere near the pieces that the Vikings had, evidenced by them, obviously being a playoff team last year. As far as the other moves, love Justin Fields going to the New York Jets. He gets to be reunited with one of his go-to targets from college in Garrett Wilson, and one of his tight ends from that time in Jeremy Ruckert. Go Bucks alert. So yeah, I think more than anything, these guys aren't going to be pushed to have their jobs taken, but they're not also the long-term solution. So sure, you might see Seattle potentially trade up for a quarterback, but I don't see them doing that with the Darnold signing. And but I do think eventually they will get their quarterback of the future. And I think Darnold and maybe a little less Geno Smith, because I think he probably still thinks he's worth a little bit more. But this deal signified that Darnold knows his current role, and he knows he has an opportunity to prove it, but they're not going to pay him the same amount as the known starters in the league. But love that question. Love the deep cut Matt Flynn shout out. And I could definitely see these being set up as such, because the quarterback market's slim and teams got to do what they got to do.
Yeah, teams are not really forking out too much high dollar amounts for these quarterbacks. It's almost like you have the high ends, which you talked about, Josh Allen, and really some of the low ends, which are the Brock Purdy is on this Mr. Irrelevant deal. But then also there's this like mid-tier where, hey, you get to compete for a job, like even like a Daniel Jones and
Indiana Jones
for the Colts, but it's Indiana Jones. There you go. So yeah, I definitely agree. Like it's prove it type of deal, but it also sets themselves up for, hey, you have a good backup at the very least if you have a good rookie that performs well.
It definitely signifies the Vikings going with J.J. McCarthy, and interested to see how that impacts things, because as you all number one podcast listeners probably remember, they just had a room with Darnold and Daniel Jones and rehabbing McCarthy. Now Darnold and Jones are gone. The keys are now with last year's rookie who got hurt before the season started. Speaking of carousel spinning, let's hit that intro.
You crazy.
I'm petty as hell. And I'm super petty.
Here we
Petty Le Pew.
go.
You know what time it is, number one podcast listeners. It's You Played Yourself. We're going to run through quick. Another couple we'll talk about a little bit, but first, You Played Yourself. I wanted to jump over to the NBA world because we could not talk about this. You Played Yourself goes to the Dallas Mavericks. I know we've poured it on recently. Is this the worst luck in history? Kyrie Irving is now out for the year with the torn ACL. It came after he had been playing the most minutes in his last 10 games. That's 39.3 minutes per game. And that was all since the Luka trade. It was the most minutes he's been playing in a long time. Last year, for comparison, he averaged 35.9 minutes per game. So he was up 3 minutes per game for a stretch of 10. Obviously, there's some talk if that contributed to it, but truly it was a weird off-balance knee buckle that didn't look good. And Kyrie is done for the year. Anthony Davis has still been banged up. They've lost a few other players. It is not inconceivable for the Mavericks to like shift gears and play for a lottery pick, which is crazy to think about because they were just in the finals and just had a franchise player that they trade away. I have never seen a trade so instantly implode a team like this. Very, very crazy. Okay. Next up, a quick one. I wanted to play a clip for you, number one podcast listeners. This is from Tez Johnson, a wide receiver from Oregon who was at the NFL Combine Media Day.
The first Ohio State game, I felt like they came out there and they wanted to see who can win skill for skill, just let us play. Second game, they kind of played it like, all right, we're going to drop back. We can't hang with these guys. skill for skill. So we're going to try to keep everything in front of us. So that's what they did, and for them it worked. So we went out there to that game and think we definitely had a really good game plan against those guys, but they executed well. So kudos to them, tip my hats to them, because they won the national championship. If you beat us that year, you definitely better go win the national championship, because that game, I think, for sure was the national championship for us.
So Tez Johnson was talking about the Oregon Ducks 2 games against Ohio State.
So congratulations, you played yourself.
Dude, the first game, you won by 1 point, pretty much on a fluke offensive pass interference call and a late slide that was a bonehead move. And the next time you played, you got fucking boat raced when it was a neutral site game. The first one, by the way, was in a home crowd, a raucous crowd, a night game in front of your home stadium. You won by 1 point. And the second time around, you got demolished. But you have the audacity to talk about a strategy of defense that clearly worked, but as if to minimize what they did to you. I don't think what they did was the reason you got absolutely crushed and were down 34-0 at one point. I don't think any strategy just alone just does that. So saying you can't hang skill for skill, I don't think it's you that can hang skill for skill, because if you take a total between the 2 games, there was no chance you were in the same realm. One could argue pretty well that the first game was more of a fluke because Ohio State lost at your place by 1 point, and then when anything was even close to neutral, they kicked your ass.
Petty alert, petty alert, petty
You played
alert.
yourself goes to Tez Johnson. I think everybody sensed it, but dude, what are we talking about here?
I forgot he even played for the team. I was like, oh, who's Tez Johnson? And I was like, I almost even said Ted Johnson right there. So sorry, Mr. Tez.
Sounded
Petty
maybe.
alert, petty alert, petty alert.
Okay. Next up on You Played Yourself, we got to talk about this guy. We purposely skipped it in the free agent recap for this reason. You Played Yourself goes to Cleveland Browns. Yes, still Cleveland Browns edge rusher Myles Garrett. Garrett signed a 4-year extension that includes $123 million guaranteed, and he has an average per year salary of $40 million. It is the highest paid non-QB contract. The deal ties Garrett to the Browns for the next 6 years and also gives him a no-trade clause. This all came after Myles Garrett himself requested a trade specifically to a contender of a team, and this man went on a media tour during Super Bowl week talking about how he needed to be traded to the report was that he had a, quote, change of heart. Yeah, I'll bet that's a change of heart. $123 million change of heart.
That would change my heart pretty quickly, too. Yeah.
The thing is, Myles Garrett talked about going to a contender, essentially correctly implied that they didn't have the talent to compete. They still don't, newsflash. And they just paid him a whole bunch of money. He clearly seems content to go. He'll walk right into Canton. I'm not denying he's a good player, but the craziness that is him implying like it wasn't about the money, he wants to go win, only to turn around and accept the money is kind of wild to me, and that's why he's found himself on You Played Yourself. I think it was the perfect opportunity for both parties to get a reset. The Browns are in absolute cap hell because of the Deshaun Watson deal. They could have gotten draft assets up the you-know-what for Myles Garrett because he is truly an elite player, generational player. So they would have gotten a haul back for him, could have got draft picks on cheap contracts while they ride out the rest of... Wow, that was a bad pun. While they coast through the end of Deshaun Watson's contract and get out of this cap hell that they're in. It would have been a win-win. They have an out because Myles Garrett was the one that requested the trade. the Browns refused to do it and instead paid him, and he accepted it. It's a you played yourself on all accounts. They don't know who's going to play quarterback there. They don't. They have a bunch of talented players, but your eye test is telling you they're not going to compete. Even in their own division, they're not going to. Speaking of edge rushers, we purposely didn't cover. Max Crosby, Las Vegas Raiders edge, signed a 3-year extension worth $106.5 million with $91.5 million guaranteed. If you number one podcast listeners are keeping track, the Dallas Cowboys price for Micah Parsons just went way up. Yep. And also, if you're keeping a tally, I know you're not surprised, but they could have signed him last year at a lesser amount. And
he probably would have taken it.
Yeah, because he's talked about taking it. Only if you're keeping track, which, not me. Football's already dead. You can't kill what's already dead. Only if you're keeping track. Next time the Cowboys do this strategy, it will work. Trust me, guys. It hasn't worked yet, waiting to pay a guy, but there's always next time.
Petty alert, petty alert, petty alert.
Listen, number one podcast listeners, I know y'all want me to talk about the Cowboys and get fired up. I know you want to talk. You want me to talk about how they created cap room by restructuring Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb's contracts, only to not use the money they cleared up, and only to push down a cap hell in the future, which they've previously done. You want me to talk about how they let key depth / rotational pieces go for very affordable contracts. People like Jordan Lewis, who is the heart and soul of their defense in their slot corner. People like Chauncey Golson, who they've developed in their own defensive line and signed with your division rival. You want me to talk more about how they haven't paid a free agent over $6 million per year, like I mentioned earlier. Number one podcast listeners, I will not fall for it. I'm not going to do that. I told y'all football's dead, and you can't kill what's already dead. Maybe in a few episodes, not this time.
Until the Cowboys draft Ashton Genty, then we'll get back on the bandwagon, right?
I would love that pick, for the record, but you teased it earlier. I'm pumped for the NFL draft preview. I really want to get Thomas's take, and I have to think, because of the lack of moves they've made and the pieces they've lost, it feels like a given they're going to go with an edge rusher in the draft, though. So this brings me to my you played yourself before I let you take over a little, Vish. My you played yourself goes to all y'all. Leave us, alleged Cowboys fans, alone. I don't need to see a post every time someone signs someone showing an empty picture of who the Cowboys signed or how it connects to the Cowboys. Leave us the fuck alone. Just let us be miserable in peace. Like, you guys don't need to keep beating a dead horse here. Give it a rest. You played yourself to all y'all. Leave us alone.
Ready for this one? Here's a you played yourself to Cowboys fans that are asking people to leave them alone.
Nah.
This will never, ever happen.
Petty alert, petty alert.
I think we've talked about it as we've gotten older. There is a sense of understanding that some of us family members have, where we just don't want to see you suffer, don't want to see you in misery, don't want you to think that football is dead, when in fact it is very much alive. But there is
on
still
Saturdays. Go Bucks.
Go Bucks, go Bucks, always on Saturdays. But there is still a very small part of me that I will never be able to suppress, and that is my hatred, and that is my just happiness to see the Cowboys just be in this pit of despair and be in this state of mediocrity. So a big you played yourself, I guess, to the Cowboys fans that are asking people to leave them alone, when in fact the Cowboys do move the needle. They are a huge part of the NFL, and it does suck to see just an incompetent front office run this franchise, because to have, $50-60 million in cap space, not sign one of the best defensive players in the NFL like Micah Parsons, and not understand what that means, put a number 88 like CeeDee Lamb at wit's ends. So I think this "you played yourself" started as a Cowboys fan just in haste, but I think it's becoming a "you played yourself" to the entire organization from a non-Cowboys fan, because it is simply astonishing that this organization, that is the highest value NFL team, or maybe pro team compared to EPL or whatever, pro team, and just see that happen. And then you see a owner that has a great cameo on Landman, one of their shows on AMC. It's just silly.
He's got time for everything but football.
He's got time for everything but football, and he's the general manager for an NFL franchise, and he's out there.
Don't worry, guys. He knows more than you. Believe
on
me,
a media tour.
His strategy of waiting to pay someone and then complaining about it will work this time. Don't you worry. Couldn't
Look at that.
me.
I'm not even a Cowboys fan, and my heart beats racing.
So, congratulations. You played yourself.
It is a perfect time to wrap up. You played yourself. And let's move on to Am I Hatin, Vish? You ready?
Let's do it.
All right, number one podcast listeners. You already know about Am I Hatin. Still waiting on a intro audio clip that we can get for Am I Hatin, but we'll figure one out. I've been talking about this for episodes, number one podcast listeners, to send in your Am I Hatin clips. And do we have a treat for you? My guy, Lopez, sent me in one. For you number one podcast listeners, let's run it.
Premal! It's Lopez. This is Am I Hatin? Non-sports related. Am I hating if someone works at a customer-facing job like the post office and they are absolutely fucking miserable? There is a line of people waiting to return their too big or too small clothes, like myself, because I am fat. I understand. The return process is a pain in the ass. But can you just scan my QR code and I can continue with my day? Thank you. Much love to the post office. This is why people hate our country.
Wow. That's legit.
My man Lopez was heated at the post office. And I get it. I'm with him. Number one podcast listeners, when you work in customer service and you act like you can't be bothered to serve a customer when it's your job, I get it. We all have bad days, but I truly don't think you ought to be doing that. I don't mean to sound insensitive, like there's just jobs left and right out there, but maybe there's something in the back that you could be doing instead of like forward facing to the customers. Maybe you can ask your manager, I just don't have it today. Maybe I ought to not be in front of customers because I'm kind of grouchy. Like, be aware of yourself. This isn't too much sense, but like if you don't have it that day, give it a rest a little. And this is coming from someone who grew up working customer service, so it's not just me talking and complaining. I do have perspective on it, which I think is important before we add an Am I Hatin, and I know Lopez does too. So, yeah, we're judgment-free zone in Am I Hatin, but definitely with this one.
Yeah.
My Am I Hatin for this episode is bracket pool etiquette. Number one podcast listeners, some of you may know a now retired bracket pool that you and I used to run, Vish, that had quite a number of participants. So this is coming from a former bracket pool manager. Don't be making your bracket pool managers track you down for money, or even worse, don't make them track you down for not completing your bracket. Figure out the technology in advance. I'm telling you right now, number one podcast listeners, Selection Sunday is coming, and the tournament starts on March 20th. Get your brackets in before then. Set a reminder for the 19th, but don't make it their job to do. Pay them, get your bracket in, and then watch your bracket implode like the rest of us.
Still have fun. Still have fun.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. You have very little work to do. You pay a quick $10 to $20 to your bracket pool manager. You fill out a bracket. That's it.
Yeah. I think...
Don't create more work for the person trying to track down hundreds of people.
And the same goes for fantasy football, fantasy basketball, fantasy hockey. We didn't talk about hockey today, but fantasy hockey, or, even fantasy baseball. A lot of people play fantasy baseball. Just pay it up front. You don't have to worry about it. It's a sunk cost. If you suck, you suck. And most people, if you win the bracket, great. You get a nice payday, but at least you have something to root for, if not for the upsets. So,
all right, Vish, you got one for us?
I think I do this time. So I will start off this Am I Hating with, I really hope this email doesn't find you well. Okay. I used to do this all the time to help with the formalities, to help with just, hey, spicing it up a little bit, or, hey, I haven't talked to you in a while. We just got to stop it. Just get to the point. I think I've gotten to the point a lot faster. Realistically, if someone says that to me, I really don't even respond to it. I kind of just use it as a throwaway. I just skip it over. So I know we've seen various videos on social media, and you will probably see a huge uptick now that you've listened to this part of the segment of Am I Hating? But at the end of the day, this is the same thing as let's circle back. But we just got to stop with the silly salutations. Hey, you can do the good morning, good afternoon, hi. That's fine. But if you need to get to the point, you need to get to the point. And maybe that's just me getting a little bit older, getting a little bit closer to 40 as we're approaching that. But, I think it's the time has come for let's just stop with the silliness. And if you do it in text,
I love it.
God help you. Just God help you. Maybe if you do it in text, you need to apply to run the Dallas Cowboys.
Look, I stay petty, so I don't have to get petty.
No thanks. All right, number one podcast listeners, let's move on to who you got and what you feeling. And so I was trying to find the right place to put this story because it did dominate sports airwaves for quite a bit and still is. But we couldn't have an episode without bringing up our guy, LeBron James. This is a pro LeBron podcast, so much so that that LeBron James. So, number one podcast listeners probably have seen it by now, but LeBron actually confronted Stephen A. Smith mid-game. I think I saw that it was between quarters. This happened at the Lakers game against the New York Knicks on Thursday, March 6th. LeBron appeared to say, keep my son out of this shit. This is presumably after Stephen A. Smith has talked repeatedly about his son Bronny. Obviously, Bronny James was the 55th pick to LeBron's Lakers. He's been playing in the G League as well as in the NBA for the Lakers. He's got a pretty nice stat line in the G League. Obviously, not a great stat line in the NBA. Stephen A. Smith has reportedly gone on as many platforms and has mainly appealed to LeBron James mostly, though it's still talking about his son a lot, essentially implying that Bronny's getting his minutes because of LeBron, and LeBron should put a stop to it and just let him flourish in the G League and get ready for the NBA. I'm implying from his words. He said the following, quote, "How are you doing him favors? We know that he's not ready yet, and I'm saying this with compassion in relation to his low averages. You know what these numbers mean. You know what it's going to do to your son, to people that are missing out on opportunities, that are busting their tail on other NBA teams in the G League in Europe and everywhere else. What kind of opportunity they're starving for. You're exposing your son like this." Vish, saying who you got feels weird in this scenario, but this is more so about, was LeBron okay to confront Stephen A. Smith? Do you tend to side with Stephen A. Smith's side of this, where he acknowledges this is a father being protective of his son, but
Sure.
He still maintains he was more appealing to LeBron, and it wasn't about Bronny. He wishes the best for Bronny. So what are your thoughts on this, Vish? A quick kind of like who you got and why.
Yeah, so I think as you've kind of laid out, and then Stephen A. Smith was on Gilbert Arenas' podcast, and again, like doubled down on what this was, and was like, hey, we should have just done this behind closed doors. I think it was weird for LeBron to confront Stephen A. Smith in that manner, but I don't think it's something where Stephen A. Smith saying, oh, we should do this behind closed doors. If Stephen A. Smith is saying this on, the press, and is able to use and say all these things not behind closed doors, then why should LeBron have to, right? So
Right.
I think Stephen A. Smith is saying it's a double standard for LeBron to attack him the way he did, but I think LeBron had issue with Stephen A. Smith calling him out as a father, not Bronny James as an NBA player or LeBron as an NBA player, but LeBron saying he put his son in a bad situation. And I think that's where someone that has a stature or a celebrity like LeBron, you give him the benefit of the doubt. Even if you go to any of the top athletes in any of the sports and you do that and you call them out personally, it's a personal attack. It's not about their talent. When you actually say, hey, as a father, you're putting your son in harm's danger. First of all, don't tell me how to parent. Second of all, if you think I'm doing that, there's a better way to say it, right? And so that's where I think I actually side with LeBron. Surprise, surprise. But if you actually look at it from a very objective lens, Stephen A. Smith is just doing this for the clicks, and he got exactly what he wants, is for every podcast, including this one, to talk about him for 3 minutes at a time, at the very least.
Facts.
So what do you think?
So I definitely, Vish, you and I talked about this in our family group chat, that as fathers now we get calling out someone for talking about your son. Because, they're spending so much time talking about a 55th pick, and they're holding him to almost like his father's standard. Talking about the points per game and assists and rebounds per game average of a bench player. You don't do that with any other player that's even around that pick. So you're doing it because it's going to drive viewers, like you said. Here's where I have a problem. If you're LeBron James, by confronting Stephen A. Smith about your son, you are not doing him any favors. I know Stephen A. Smith used that verbiage, but I mean in the sense of your son is trying to be taken serious as a professional basketball player. There's no other professional basketball player that has their father fighting their battles for them.
That's true.
In front of cameras and courtside. I know not everybody, no one's father is LeBron James. I get that part. But he's trying to have his own career. You're doing him a disservice by fighting the battles for him if he had a problem with it, he needs to bring it up. You're inviting more criticism because it's feeding into the narrative about you controlling things for his behalf, which, for the record, we've said on this number one podcast in your headphones that why shouldn't he have the right to have nepotism in this case? Why not? Why not have nepotism if you can? They didn't use it a first round pick on him. They used a 55th overall pick, which, by the way, if you're comparing apples to apples, his averages are similar to the picks around him. His averages in the G League are much better than the people that were drafted around him in the second round than their averages are in the G League. So comparing apples to apples, it wasn't like, as far as a quality pick, I get it was nepotism, but his quality fits that draft selection. But you need to let his game do the talking. You can't fight his battles for him. I didn't like the way he did that. You can have a problem with someone talking about their son, but until now, it looked like Stephen A. Smith was the one that was doing too much talking about Bronny. Now he made it into a thing about him and took away, if you're trying to bring shine to your son, you took it away by letting yourself get in the feels. That should have been a Bronny to Stephen A. Smith thing, or not brought up at all. He's so good at that usually. So clearly it was a father being angry and wanting to be protective of his son, but you also have to realize that your son is a professional basketball player, so he is not exempt from criticism. Everybody is. It's the nature of the game. He's paid millions of dollars just like everybody else. You should want him treated like anybody else. And anybody else doesn't have their father fighting the battles for him. So that's where I have an issue with it. It reads as like kind of like not little league dad, but like amateur athlete's dad complaining about playing time. Like it's kind of like that kind of energy. So that's how I see it. But
yeah,
of course, we're pro LeBron.
Yep, 100%.
Podcast. You already know number one podcast listeners, but figured that was a good one to talk about since it was so poignant for this time. All right, Vish, what you feeling lately?
Well, I finally finished the series Mad Men.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been something that I've intermixed, and there's so many different shows right now, especially with Severance and White Lotus season 3 and even Yellow Jackets. So, and then I guess I got to watch The Pit. I don't know if you've heard anything about it, but yeah, Mad Men was a very interesting show. I mean, it's very misogynistic and all that. It helps highlight exactly how the times were and exactly the glass ceiling that we talk about for women and what that means, and kind of understanding that, so you don't have to live like they did in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. We live in the now, and there's still some of those struggles. So there's still a lot of relevant topics, but that's what I'm feeling. And then I think beyond that is just getting ready for the summertime, right? So the weather outside is weather. Around the water cooler and the I hope this email finds you well, and how's the weather doing? But it's nice to do that. I know we talked about it as fathers, but just being able to go outside and not stay inside the entire time is just nice. To go to the park and like spend a Saturday or a Sunday and not have to deal with anything. So,
and more daylight.
Yeah.
For it, yeah.
What are you feeling? I know you just had a fun time with the Oscars. So did you like it?
Yeah,
how'd you feel? And
Oscar season wrapped up. My wife and I were able to see 9 out of the 10 Best Picture nominees.
Nice. That's legit.
Yeah, I was overall pretty underwhelmed with the group of movies this past year. I was very surprised that Nora really felt like they were the big winner from the Oscars. They won a lot of trophies, and it was, don't get me wrong, it was a good movie. It was a very positive light shined on sex workers, and the main actress, Mikey Madison, won Best Actress. But I largely thought I felt like it was the trendy pick, and there wasn't a true favorite this year, so they kind of went with the one that got the most momentum going in. I think my biggest snub was Demi Moore not winning for Best Actress. She was tremendous in The Substance, and I personally probably would have given Best Picture to The Brutalist, but overall, it was a year where I think a lot of movies had a legitimate chance, and there wasn't a clear-cut favorite, but it just felt like kind of the Oscars, to use your term, zagged just for the purpose of zagging, with all the love for Anora. So,
yeah, I was surprised because usually I've seen at least one of the movies that have been, and none of them appealed to me. I think The Brutalist was probably the one that would have. It's still, I mean, it's a really long movie, but usually movies of that nature have to be long to be able to tell the full story and the full scope of
this one,
of the times. Yeah.
For context, number one podcast listeners, if you're going back to watch it, The Brutalist is 3.5 hours long. It has a built-in intermission in the movie. So,
there you go.
Yeah. It is very long. Don't watch it if you're sleepy. A lot of dialogue in it, but yeah, it wasn't like Oppenheimer last year where it was the clear-cut favorite. This year was a little different, but as you number one podcast listeners know by now, I like seeing these movies because, to your point that you made, a lot of these movies aren't ones that I would go out and see, but
right.
My wife loves the Oscars and always has. So a few years ago, we started, wanting to have like a horse in the race, and I wanted to watch.
It's a cool tradition.
Yeah, I wanted to watch the movie, so I actually wanted to root for movies and have something to say about them because I didn't used to know much about them. So this forces us to see movies I wouldn't usually see, and we found a lot of good ones from that. So I love the tradition that we have, like around after the New Year, essentially through the beginning of March, to watch those movies and have a take on them, basically.
It's just a cool tradition to just be able to do this. I know you and Steph have done this even pre-kids, and just being able to do it, essentially after bedtime. You're not watching The Brutalist with Barrett and Otis.
No,
so
for sure. Okay, number one podcast listeners, you know how we like to wrap up each episode. Let's hit that intro for Too Much Sense. Okay, number one podcast listeners, the Too Much Sense for this episode. I saw this quote. This is from Buddha. I hope the credit was correct. So shout out Buddha.
What it do, baby? Yeah.
Or shout out whoever said it if it wasn't Buddha. But, quote, in a war of ego, the loser always wins, end quote. I love the right to the point sayings, and this one really appealed to me, and it's something I've really worked on. I think ego makes you do some selfish things sometimes without realizing it. My ego a lot of times manifested in my need to be right and, give advice when people didn't ask for it. It is very hard to put it aside, but if you can, you feel a sense of pride in how you handle tough situations, and the preservation of your dignity and lack of regret is so powerful. There are previous times where my need to be right outweighed that, and now I've really worked to make it less important, and I found myself in situations of conflict when I react in a healthy way and don't let my ego get in the way. I usually find myself filled with a lot of pride and no regret in how I handled the situation. I can look back on it and say I never said anything I wish I could take back or I said in the heat of a moment. So remember, in a war of ego, the loser always wins. If you don't prioritize your ego, your good chances are you're the winner, and you didn't need to go out and prove something to someone just for the sake of doing it.
Yeah, I think the 2 cents I want to add is, I know you get hard on yourself, but I wouldn't view it as ego. I just view it as, I think you understand and you have this humility about you already, which makes it easy to talk to and confide in, and the people out there that understand who my brother is at the core of it understand that. There are people that might view it as ego, but I think at the end of the day, there's a loving aspect of it. So it's never out of nefarious reasons or an ego. Ego always has a negative connotation to it. So I wanted to make sure that you didn't feel that way. No. And I'm sure it's happened in the past, but I think it's something where it's important to say where it might feel selfish at times, but it's not. You're always rooted in the love of caring for others beyond yourself, and that's more of a detriment where it's almost the other way. So I just wanted to make sure that the number one podcast listeners understands who my brother is at the core and that he is a loving individual. That's what his name means, and that's who he is at a core. So
deep cut. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks for saying that. Appreciate it. That's a good note to end on, number one podcast listeners. And even though that quote was about losing, you already know how you, number one podcast listeners, stay winning. That's by tuning in right now, by subscribing, by telling a friend to tell a friend, and by using that code PREM20 at magicmind.com/prem and getting yourself some Magic Mind. You already know we stay winning, even though that quote is about losing. And you number one podcast listeners are winners for tuning in. And I'm a winner because of my appreciation for all of you. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for sharing the episode. Thank you for interacting with us. Thanks, Vish, for joining and co-hosting today.
Absolutely. Love it.
This episode. Love you.
Love it too.
And love you, number one podcast listeners. We will talk to you next time.
Peace.